How did Conor McGregor get so famous? So today we're going to be exploring no cuts, no segments, anything, the raw star power and how Conor McGregor got to the star power that he has obtained. So starting off in Conor McGregor's MMA career, he was in Cage Warriors in Ireland, and he's always had the aura that he's had. He's always had a great voice, and obviously he's known how to fight. Conor McGregor has always been a great fighter, and ultimately that's part of why he's a superstar. As Dana White has said, is because he can talk really well. It's part of it. Is because he can fight really well. It's also part of it. Is it because he's outlandish? Of course. And you piece all the things together, and that's why Conor McGregor is who he is. So starting out, obviously, he was in Cage Warriors, and as we all know, his parents doubted him. They didn't think MMA could ever be a real job, could ever really bring him anywhere. And then ultimately from Cage Warriors, I believe he was 6-0 or so when he got his first UFC contract. And many people don't know this, but the UFC ultimately, at the beginning, was not going to give him a contract. And so with that, Conor McGregor obviously gets his UFC contract. And here's where nationalism comes into play. I don't think many people realize, but nationalism was a huge part of Conor McGregor's star power. You can be the most outlandish, have the best aura, but at this time, the UFC wasn't anything near what the UFC was today. The UFC was much smaller, much unknown, much more frowned upon. As you've heard Dana White talk about before, venues didn't want the UFC in the early days. Obviously, this is a little bit past then, but still, the UFC is nothing like it was today. So Conor McGregor gets into the UFC, and, he's at his first bout on the card. Obviously, he's not the main event, but a ton of people flying from Ireland to the United States to watch this fight. And you can hear it. If you ever go back and watch some of Conor McGregor's early fights when the UFC will post the free fights or on any channel that may have it, go watch. The crowds are always for McGregor. You have tons of Irish fans flying in from everywhere, right? So he gets into the UFC. He starts working his way up the rankings in featherweight at first, obviously. And every time he fights, there's more and more Irish fans. The Irish people evidently are very prideful in their nation, and they never thought an Irishman would be a professional fighter. That's something Conor McGregor's always talked about. No one ever thought that an Irishman would be a professional fighter. And this is very important. So Conor McGregor, he keeps going. He's going to fight Jose Aldo, and then obviously something happens, and then he has to fight Chad Mendes for the interim belt. And this is really when Conor McGregor went from, okay, this guy, he really can be a star, to whoa, this guy is doing it. And so Conor McGregor wins by TKO against Chad Mendes, this is when Conor really started getting paid, right? This was his first fight where he made over $1 million in disclosed earnings. Obviously, sometimes there's behind the back stuff, but this was the first time he made over $1 million in disclosed earnings. And a lot of people obviously called Conor McGregor a sellout and whatnot. After this fight, Conor had money and chose to continue fighting, and then they do the World Tour press conference. A lot of people, if you didn't watch MMA at this time, they traveled around and around. They went to Brazil, they did a press conference. They did a ton of press conferences in America. The Jose Aldo Conor McGregor fight was a huge deal in the MMA space at that time, right? And then obviously McGregor comes out and wins in 13 seconds by knockout, which was one of the most insane things anybody's ever seen. If you ever get a chance, go watch one of those Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo reaction compilations. It is one of the craziest things you will ever see. Everyone's, it is absolutely insane. Insane, I tell you. So Conor McGregor KOs Jose Aldo, absolutely insane. Crowd, woo, woo. Everybody was extremely surprised. And then that's truly when he wasn't just an Irish superstar, he wasn't just an MMA superstar. This is when Conor McGregor started getting the celebrity aura. Now he's the actual champion, not the interim champion. He just beat the only champion the featherweight division had ever seen, Jose Aldo. So obviously, he has all this hype, he has all this aura. And then he goes up and, he wants to get another belt. And he ends up and then Obviously remember the champ with Eddie Alvarez, so he's the first double champ ever in the UFC, goes and then TKOs Eddie Alvarez, which was absolutely insane, especially seeing that he's still going crazy today in BKFC. If you didn't know, Eddie Alvarez and Chad Mendes, who actually Conor McGregor also TKO'd, they fought in BKFC, the bare knuckle fighting championship. And then from there, he was the double champ. He beat Eddie Alvarez. He has the 2 belts, which obviously ended up getting relinquished from him because he went to then go fight Floyd Mayweather. And this is when Conor went from, a big superstar, to, okay, this guy is ridiculous money now, right? So obviously, proper 12's moving along. He gets to fight Floyd Money Mayweather. And reportedly, I know we all remember this, $100 million each to fight. Obviously, Dana White was in on the promotion, Steven Espinoza. And basically, Floyd was 49-0. Floyd wasn't retired. He was risking an a 1 on his boxing record to go fight Conor McGregor. And so they do the tour of the press conference. Everybody's watching this. Everybody wants to see what happens. Everybody's going crazy. It's absolutely insane. And so, after all the fight builds up, I vividly remember this. I wasn't even an MMA fan at the time at all. And I go over to my neighbor's house, and, his dad's talking about, oh my gosh, Floyd Mayweather's fighting Conor McGregor. And I'm like, Conor McGregor, I knew that name. Put it this way, I knew who Conor McGregor was, but I didn't know who Floyd Mayweather was. Please don't hate me for that. But so obviously we have that whole situation, and Conor fights Floyd. And that was insane because, as we all remember, he got TKO'd, but he got TKO'd in the later rounds. He went many rounds with Floyd Mayweather, which was just insane. From then, he was already super paid, right? Proper 12s, getting tons and tons of momentum, which ultimately, between him and partners, sold for $600 million. I believe his cut was $200 million. So, he has the $100 million Floyd fight, $200 million proper 12, and he comes back, right? And what does he want to do? He wants that lightweight belt again. So he challenges Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? Another crazy build-up. They're doing press conferences everywhere. They had the press conference where Conor left Khabib speechless, where he was talking about, I don't even want to speak on it. It was politically motivated. And Khabib was, I don't understand your English. Absolutely insane press conferences, build up. And remember, he ultimately went to jail in New York City for throwing the dolly at Khabib's bus when he picked up the dolly and threw it because allegedly Khabib and his buddies had slapped Artem Lobov, who later ended up trying to sue McGregor for proper 12. But, Conor was standing on business. He threw the dolly at Khabib's bus. He got arrested for it. He went to jail. It was a very old picture, but, there's his mugshot. Or there was a picture of his mugshot, I should say. And then, the build-up keeps going, and they fight. And obviously, we all remember that Conor tapped. But there were some good exchanges. Arguably, one of the only few rounds that Khabib lost was against Conor in one of the stand-up early rounds. But ultimately, Khabib's grappling. I think we all kind of expected the fight to go the way it did. Because, Khabib, he's undefeated. He's very, very, very good at grappling. And so, obviously he loses to Khabib. And then he has arguably one of the easiest matches in his life. He goes against Cowboy Cerrone in one of his last fights. He knocks him out in the first round. Absolutely insane. If you watch the highlights, the way he shoulder hit him, one of the most insane things you'll ever see. The amount of damage he did to Cowboy's face in one round was ridiculous. And then we have the Nate Diaz fights. I ultimately think Nate Diaz, it's just his aura. He's just such a, what's up, bruh? He's such a gangster. He's a savage. And so him going against McGregor, the loudmouth, it was one of the best 2-fight series ever. Obviously Conor tapped in the first fight. Nate accepted the immediate rematch. And then they were off to the races. And then, obviously we have the Poirier trilogy, which was kind of mixed up in the whole Diaz timing. But ultimately, Conor's looking to come back. And originally he was talking about Dana was icing him. His longtime associate John Kavanagh came on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani and said that, the UFC wasn't calling McGregor back. McGregor was desperately trying to get, back into action, and the UFC wasn't giving him dates. You remember he came out and said June 29th he would face Chandler, and then he started talking about the Diaz trilogy and the Poirier quadrilogy, and the Justin Gaethje beat Dustin, and he was talking about Basin Gaethje, and it's just all these different things that McGregor's talked about having came to fruition, and allegedly he's letting it on the UFC, you know? Apparently he has one fight left on his contract, and I guess the UFC doesn't want him to do the Ngannou and just go and make a bunch of money in boxing again. So it's very interesting. Apparently he said that actually today or yesterday, I believe, that the UFC is finally getting him out of the ice, and he's finally going to come back and, you know, compete against Chandler in the summer, which I'm really looking forward to. You know, McGregor, as I think is commonly said, John Jones is the best in the UFC, and Conor McGregor is the most valuable to the UFC, right? McGregor threw the UFC way past the billion valuation, and ultimately, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing Conor McGregor back in action, and hopefully you are too.